The rain started just as Miguel drove into the village. It wasn't heavy at first. Small drops hit the windshield one by one. Then the sky turned dark, and the rain came down so hard that he could barely see the road. Miguel Carvalho tightened his hands on the steering wheel. He was 33 years old and worked as a psychologist in Lisbon. Every day he listened to people talk about fear, sadness, and strange things they believed they had seen. He had spent years studying the human mind. Because of that, he did not believe in ghosts. He believed in stress. He believed in trauma. He believed that every strange story had a real reason behind it. That belief had never failed him. Until today. The village was almost empty. Old stone houses stood close together. Their windows were closed even though it was still early evening. An old man sat outside a small shop. As Miguel's car passed, the man looked up. Their eyes met for only a second. The old man's face changed. He looked afraid. Not surprised. Afraid. Miguel slowed down and rolled down the window. "Excuse me," he called. "Can you tell me where the Carvalho house is?" The old man stayed quiet. He looked at Miguel for a long time before speaking. "You shouldn't stay there." Miguel smiled politely. "It's my grandmother's house." "I know." The old man stood up slowly. "That is why you shouldn't stay there." Before Miguel could ask another question, the old man walked inside the shop and locked the door. Miguel frowned. What was that about? No one answered. 10 minutes later, he reached the house. It stood alone on top of a cliff. The sea crashed against the rocks far below. The building was larger than he remembered. Or maybe it only felt larger because he hadn't seen it since he was a child. The stone walls were covered with dark green vines. Many windows faced the ocean. Some were broken. Some looked perfectly clean. The front gate hung open. It moved gently in the wind, making a soft squeaking sound. Miguel stepped out of the car. The air smelled of rain and salt. He looked around. No birds. No insects. Nothing. The place felt empty. Too empty. His grandmother, Rosa Carvalho, had died 2 weeks earlier. She had lived alone here for almost 40 years. No one knew much about her. She rarely visited the village. The villagers rarely visited her. The lawyer who handled her had given Miguel only one key and one sentence. She wanted you to spend 7 nights here. That was all. No explanation. The front door opened easily. The inside of the house surprised him. He expected dust, broken furniture, spider webs. Instead, everything looked clean. Someone had been taking care of the place. The wooden floor shined. The furniture was old but polished. A clock hung on the wall. Its hands pointed to 3:17. It wasn't moving. Miguel placed his bags near the stairs. "Hello." His voice echoed through the house. No answer. He laughed quietly. Of course. He wasn't expecting anyone. Still, the silence felt strange. Most empty houses made little sounds. Wood creaked. Pipes moved. The wind touched the windows. This house made almost no sound at all. He walked into the living room. Family photographs covered one wall. He smiled as he looked at them. His parents. His grandparents. Old birthdays. Christmas dinners. Then his smile disappeared. Every photo had one thing in common. One person was missing. Not hidden. Not blurry. Gone. A chair sat empty where someone should have been. A hand rested on a shoulder that wasn't there. Children smiled at someone outside the picture. Miguel picked up one photograph. His grandmother stood beside. No one. Yet her arm was wrapped around empty space. He turned the picture over. Written on the back were 4 words. We forgot his face. Miguel frowned. What does that mean? A loud bang came from upstairs. He looked toward the ceiling. Probably a window. The wind was getting stronger. He told himself that. Even though he hadn't heard any wind inside. He climbed the stairs slowly. The second floor had a long hallway. 5 doors. He remembered only 4. He stopped. Counted again. 5. He shook his head. I must be remembering it wrong. The first room was a bedroom. Nothing unusual. The second held old books and boxes. The third was empty. The fourth was locked. The old brass handle was cold. Much colder than the air around it. Miguel tried the key. It didn't fit. As he turned away, he heard something behind the door. A small sound. Like someone dragging a finger across wood. Slowly. Very slowly. Scratch. 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 Then it stopped. Miguel waited. Nothing. He smiled to himself. Mice. That had to be it. Old houses always had mice. The 5th room was at the end of the hall. Its door stood open. Inside was a child's bedroom. A small wooden horse sat on the floor. A faded blue blanket covered the bed. A toy train rested on the window. Everything was covered in dust. Except one thing. The rocking chair. It moved gently. Back and forth. Back and forth. Miguel froze. The window was closed. There was no wind. The chair slowly came to a stop. A strange feeling filled his chest. He suddenly wanted to leave the room. Not because he was scared. Because something felt wrong. Like walking into a conversation that had already started. He went downstairs. The feeling slowly faded. He laughed at himself. You spend your life studying fear, he said quietly. Now your own mind is playing tricks on you. The kitchen was well stocked. Canned food. Rice. Pasta. Fresh bottles of water. Someone had prepared the house before he arrived. He found a kettle and made tea. The warm cup helped him relax. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was almost black. As he sat at the kitchen table, he noticed an old notebook. It wasn't there before. He was sure of it. He opened it. The first page was written in his grandmother's handwriting. Miguel, if you are reading this, then I am gone. He smiled sadly. He missed her more than he had realized. He turned the page. You think this house belongs to our family. It does not. Our family belongs to the house. His smile faded. The next pages were filled with strange notes. Some sentences were crossed out again and again. Do not answer if someone calls your name after midnight. Do not look into the mirrors after 3 in the morning. If you hear someone crying outside, keep the curtains closed. Miguel closed the notebook. His grandmother had become forgetful in her last years. Maybe she had imagined these things. Maybe writing them down made her feel safe. That had to be it. The lights suddenly went out. Darkness filled the house. Miguel sighed. Great. He searched his bag for a flashlight. Before he could find it, 3 knocks echoed through the house. Knock. 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 They came from the front door. He walked to it. Opened it. No one was there. The road was empty. The rain had stopped. The sea was quiet. He looked down. A small wooden box rested on the doorstep. He was certain it hadn't been there a second earlier. He picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. Inside was an old cassette tape. There was no label. Only one sentence carved into the plastic. Play me alone. Miguel looked toward the empty road. For the first time that day, he no longer felt alone. It wasn't the feeling of someone watching him. It was stranger than that. It felt as if the house had finally noticed he was there. Miguel stood in the doorway for almost a minute. The rain had stopped. The road was empty. The village lights were far away, glowing like tiny stars. No footsteps. No cars. No people. Only the sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs below. He looked down at the wooden box again. It was old, but it was dry. That made no sense. Everything outside was wet from the rain. The box should have been soaked. Instead, it looked as if someone had just placed it there. He looked around one last time before closing the door. The lock clicked. For some reason, the sound made him feel safer. Miguel carried the box into the living room and placed it on the table. Inside was only the cassette tape. Nothing else. No note. No name. No date. Just 4 words carved into the plastic. "Play me alone." He laughed quietly. Someone has a strange sense of humor. His grandmother still owned an old cassette player. It sat on a shelf beneath the television. He plugged it into the wall. Nothing happened. The power was still out. He sighed. Forget it. He put the tape back into the box. As he turned away, a soft click came from behind him. The cassette player had turned on by itself. The small red light glowed in the darkness. Miguel frowned. That's impossible. There was no electricity. The tape slowly slid into the player. He was certain he hadn't touched it. His heartbeat became faster. The machine made a quiet whirring sound. Static filled the room. Then, a man's voice began to speak. It was calm, slow, almost gentle. "If you are hearing this..." The voice stopped. Static. Then it continued. "You stayed." Miguel stood completely still. He didn't know the voice. Yet something about it felt familiar. Very familiar. "As long as you stay inside after sunset, you still have time." More static. The tape crackled loudly. Then the voice whispered, "Don't let it see you looking." The recording ended. The tape stopped. The room became silent again. Miguel quickly opened the player. The tape was gone. He searched the floor, the table, the box. Nothing. It had simply disappeared. He rubbed his eyes. "I need sleep." He wanted a logical answer. Someone had hidden another tape. The machine had a battery. His memory was wrong. Anything. Anything except what he had just seen. A loud crash came from upstairs. This time it wasn't a small noise. It sounded like heavy furniture falling over. Miguel grabbed the flashlight from his bag. The beam shook slightly. Not because of the batteries. Because his hand was shaking. The hallway upstairs looked exactly as before. 5 doors. All closed. Except one. The child's bedroom. Its door was now shut. Miguel was sure he had left it open. He slowly pushed it. The room was empty. The rocking chair stood still. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was broken. Then he noticed the toy train. It was no longer on the window. It sat in the middle of the floor, pointing toward the closet. Miguel smiled nervously. "I don't remember leaving it there." He didn't believe his own words. The closet door was slightly open. A small gap. Darkness waited inside. Miguel stepped closer. The floor creaked under his feet. He reached for the handle. Pulled. The door opened slowly. Inside, there were no clothes. Only hundreds of pieces of paper. Every wall inside the closet was covered with children's drawings. Most showed the same house. This house. Some were drawn with bright colors. Others were made with black pencil. As the drawings became newer, the colors disappeared. Until the last picture. It showed only the house. Standing alone. Under a black sky. One sentence was written beneath it in uneven handwriting. "It learns your face." Miguel felt cold. A sudden laugh echoed through the hallway. Not loud. Not evil. A child's laugh. Happy. For only 1 second. Then silence. Miguel rushed into the hallway. Nobody. Every room was empty. He checked his watch. 11:43 p.m. Only 17 minutes until midnight. He suddenly remembered the notebook. "Do not answer if someone calls your name after midnight." He almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he hurried downstairs. The fire in the living room had gone out. The room felt much colder now. Miguel closed every curtain. Locked every window. Checked the front door twice. Then 3 times. He wasn't sure why. Midnight came quietly. No clock chimed. No wind blew outside. Everything stopped. Even the sea. Miguel noticed it first. The waves had vanished. He couldn't hear them anymore. He walked toward the window. Slowly pulled the curtain aside. The ocean was still there. Huge waves crashed against the cliffs. But they made no sound. Not one. His ears rang in the silence. Then someone knocked. Not on the front door. On the window. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Miguel's body froze. He was standing on the second floor of the house. There was no balcony. Nothing outside the window except a 50-meter drop to the rocks below. Another 3 knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Something was outside. Very slowly. He looked through the glass. Nothing. Only darkness. Then he noticed a handprint. On the outside. Wet. Fresh. Someone had pressed a hand against the window. From outside. His breathing became fast. He stepped backward. Then he heard it. Miguel. A woman's voice. Soft. Kind. His mother's voice. Exactly as he remembered it. Miguel. Open the window. His eyes filled with tears before he could stop them. His mother had died when he was 15. He had never forgotten her voice. Not once. Again. Miguel. I know you're inside. He covered his ears. This isn't real. The voice became sweeter. You left me alone. His chest tightened. That sentence. Those were the last words she had ever said to him in the hospital. Words no one else had heard. He had never told anyone. Ever. The voice knocked again. Please. Just look at me. Miguel squeezed his eyes shut. His grandmother's warning filled his mind. Do not answer. He stayed silent. The voice waited. Then it changed. Slowly. It became deeper. Rougher. Older. Finally, it no longer sounded human at all. A low growl came through the glass. Then. Nothing. Miguel stayed awake until sunrise. The first light filled the room. Birds began singing. The sound of the sea returned. Everything looked normal again. He walked carefully to the window. The handprint was gone. But scratched into the glass were 4 words. You remembered this time. Miguel stared at the message. His reflection looked back at him. Then. His reflection smiled. Miguel did not. The smile stayed on the glass for 1 more second. Then it disappeared. Miguel did not sleep. He sat in the living room until the sun came up. The house looked different in daylight. The walls were just old stone. The windows were clean. The fireplace was cold. Everything looked normal. That almost made the night feel like a dream. Almost. He walked upstairs again. The words on the window were gone. No scratches. No handprint. Nothing. He touched the glass. It felt cold. Too cold for a warm morning. Miguel took out his phone. Still no signal. He wanted to leave. Pack his bags. Drive back to Lisbon. Forget this place. But every time he thought about leaving, another thought pushed its way into his mind. What really happened here? He couldn't remember much about his childhood. He had always believed that was normal. Children forget things. Don't they? He opened his grandmother's notebook again. This time he read every page. Most of it was confusing. Some pages were filled with drawings. Others had only 1 sentence. Some pages had been torn out. One page caught his attention. It simply said, "The house does not make people forget. It hides memories until it needs them." Miguel read the sentence 3 times. He didn't understand it. A folded paper slipped out from between the pages. It was an old photograph. 5 children stood outside the house. Miguel recognized himself immediately. He looked about 8 years old. He smiled at the camera. 4 other children stood beside him. He didn't recognize any of them. One face had been scratched away. Not with a knife. With hundreds of tiny lines, as if someone wanted to destroy it completely. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Only one of you left." Miguel felt a chill run down his back. There had been 5 children. Why could he only remember himself? Around noon, Miguel decided to visit the village. Maybe someone there knew the truth. The streets were quiet. People looked at him as he walked past. No one smiled. No one waved. Some even closed their doors when they saw him. It was as if they already knew who he was. At the end of the road stood a small bakery. An old woman worked behind the counter. She looked at Miguel for a long moment. Then she whispered, "You have your mother's eyes." Miguel smiled politely. "You knew her?" The woman nodded. She tried to leave. Miguel frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman looked toward the window, as if she wanted to make sure no one was listening. "Your family has lived in that house for generations. My grandmother lived there." "No." The old woman shook her head. "The house lived through your family." Miguel had heard almost the same words in the notebook. His smile disappeared. "What happened when I was a child?" The woman's face turned pale. "You don't remember?" "No." She stayed silent for several seconds. Finally, she leaned closer. There were 5 children. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. "The photograph." She nodded slowly. "You found it. What happened to them?" The woman looked down at the floor. "They disappeared." Miguel stared at her. "All of them?" "All except one." Silence filled the bakery. Finally, she looked into his eyes. "You." Miguel laughed. It wasn't because he thought she was joking. It was because he couldn't think of anything else to do. Children don't just disappear. They did. The police. They searched for months. They found nothing? They found footprints. Where? The woman pointed toward the cliffs. They went into the house. She stopped speaking. They never came out. Miguel left without buying anything. His hands felt cold. His head hurt. Back at the house, he searched every room again. Nothing. No hidden doors. No strange sounds. Just silence. Late that afternoon, he noticed something unusual. The hallway upstairs looked longer. He was sure of it. Yesterday, 5 doors. Today, 6. He counted twice. 6. At the very end stood a door he had never seen before. It was painted black. Its handle was silver. Dust covered everything around it. But not the door itself. It looked new. As if someone had built it yesterday. Miguel walked toward it. Every step made the floor creak. His heartbeat became louder. The closer he got, the colder the hallway became. His breath turned white. He stopped in front of the door. There was no keyhole. Only one sentence carved into the wood. "Remember first." He reached for the handle. Before his fingers touched it, someone whispered behind him, "Miguel." He spun around. The hallway was empty. The whisper came again, this time from downstairs. "Miguel." It wasn't his mother. It wasn't a child. It sounded like an old man. Weak. Tired. Almost crying. "Please. I've been waiting." Miguel slowly walked down the stairs. The voice led him to the living room. Then it stopped. The grandfather clock stood against the wall. Yesterday, it had shown 3:17. Now, its hands were moving. Slowly. Tick. 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 The time read 3:16. Instead of moving forward, the clock was moving backward. Tick. 3:15. Tick. 3:14. Miguel stared in disbelief. Then he heard a loud knock from inside the clock. Not outside. Inside. One knock. Then another. Then another. Something was trapped inside. It knocked 3 times. Stopped. Then a child's voice whispered through the wood. "Miguel. You promised you wouldn't leave me." Miguel stepped backward. His breathing became fast. "I don't know who you are." The knocking stopped. Silence. Then one final sentence came from inside the clock. You used to. The room fell silent. Miguel looked at the old clock. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of what he could see. He was afraid of what he had forgotten. Miguel could not stop thinking about the voice inside the clock. You used to. The words stayed in his mind long after the house became quiet again. He looked at the clock. It had stopped. The hands pointed to 3:11. The knocking was gone. The voice was gone. Only silence remained. He walked closer. The wood looked old and cracked. He opened the small door at the bottom of the clock. Nothing. No hidden speaker. No animal. No child. Only dust and old gears. He knocked on the inside walls. Solid wood. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. Miguel closed the door. As soon as he turned around. Knock. He spun back. Nothing. The sound had not come from the clock. It came from upstairs. One slow knock. Then another. Then silence. He grabbed the flashlight and climbed the stairs. The hallway was dark even though the sun was still outside. The 6 doors were still there. At the end of the hallway stood the black door. It looked different now. The silver handle was moving. Very slowly. Back and forth. As if someone on the other side was trying to open it. Miguel stood still. The handle stopped moving. A child's voice came through the door. Soft. Almost too soft to hear. Is it daytime? Miguel didn't answer. The notebook had warned him. Do not answer voices you do not understand. The voice spoke again. I'm scared. Miguel's chest tightened. It sounded like a little boy. No older than 7. I'm all alone. Miguel closed his eyes. No, he whispered to himself. This isn't real. The voice stopped. Then it laughed. The laugh changed as it echoed through the wood. First it sounded like a child. Then a teenager. Then an old man. Finally, it sounded exactly like Miguel. He stepped away from the door. His heart was beating so hard it hurt. He turned around and hurried downstairs. He didn't look back. That evening he searched the attic. He had not been up there since he arrived. The ladder was old. Every step made it creak. The attic smelled of dust and damp wood. Broken furniture filled the room. Old trunks. Books. A cracked mirror covered with a white cloth. In one corner sat a small wooden chest. It had Miguel's name carved into the lid. He frowned. He had never seen it before. Inside the chest were toys. A red toy car. A stuffed bear missing one eye. A small notebook. Miguel opened it. The writing was messy. A child's handwriting. The first page read, My name is Miguel. I am 7 years old. His hands froze. It was his diary. He slowly turned the page. Grandma says I must never play in the basement. Next page. I heard someone crying under the floor today. Next page. Mother says nobody lives under the house. Grandma got angry when she said that. Miguel swallowed. His mouth had gone dry. He kept reading. The last pages were different. The handwriting became shaky. The words were harder to read. He says his name is Daniel. He wants to come upstairs. Grandma says I must never unlock the red door. Miguel frowned. The red door? There was no red door in the house. Only the black one. He turned the final page. Only one sentence was written there. Large. Uneven. Pressed so hard the pencil had almost torn the paper. I let him out. A cold breeze touched the back of Miguel's neck. He turned around. No one. But the white cloth had fallen from the old mirror. Miguel was certain it had been covering it a moment ago. Now the mirror was uncovered. He looked at his reflection. It looked back at him. Perfectly normal. He sighed with relief. Then, his reflection blinked. Miguel did not. His stomach dropped. The reflection smiled. A slow, sad smile. Then it raised one hand. Miguel's own hand stayed at his sides. The reflection placed a finger over its lips, as if asking him to stay quiet. Then the mirror went dark. His reflection disappeared completely. Only the empty attic remained. Miguel stumbled backward. His shoulder hit another old trunk. The lid fell open. Inside were newspaper clippings. Most were too damaged to read. One headline caught his eye. 4 children still missing. Below it was an old photograph. Police officers stood outside the salt house. Miguel was there, wrapped in a blanket, looking straight at the camera. His face showed no emotion. A short paragraph sat beneath the picture. The only child found alive has no memory of what happened. Doctors believe the trauma caused complete memory loss. Miguel's breathing became shallow. He had forgotten. Not by accident. Something terrible had happened. Something so frightening. His own mind had buried it. As the sun disappeared below the cliffs, the house became silent once again. Miguel carried the newspaper downstairs. He needed fresh air. He stepped outside onto the front porch. The cold wind hit his face. For the first time in 2 days, he felt free. Then he noticed footprints in the mud. Small footprints. A child's. They began at the edge of the cliff, walked across the yard, up the porch steps, and ended at the front door. There were no footprints leading away, only toward the house. Miguel slowly looked up. The front door was still closed. Locked. He was holding the key in his pocket. Very slowly. 3 soft knocks came from the other side. Knock. 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 Someone, or something, had just knocked from inside the house. Miguel stared at the front door. 3 knocks. Slow. Calm. Someone was inside. But he had locked the house before stepping outside. He reached into his pocket. The key was still there. His hands were shaking. He told himself there had to be an answer. Maybe another door. Maybe an open window. Maybe someone had been hiding inside all along. He unlocked the door. The old wood creaked as it opened. The house was dark. The fire in the fireplace had gone out. The air felt colder than before. Miguel. The voice came from somewhere deep inside the house. Not loud. Not quiet. Just enough for him to hear. It was the same child's voice. I'm hungry. Miguel didn't answer. He closed the door behind him. The lock clicked. The voice did not speak again. He searched every room on the first floor. The kitchen. The living room. The study. Nothing. No one. Everything was exactly where he had left it. Then he noticed something strange. The rug in the middle of the living room had moved. Only a little. Just enough to show part of the wooden floor underneath. Miguel frowned. He was sure the rug had covered the floor completely. He pulled it aside. Underneath was a square wooden door. A trap door. His heart began to race. He remembered the lawyer's words. Spend 7 nights here. He remembered the note. Open nothing beneath the house. Slowly, he stepped back. There is no basement, he whispered. The plans had shown nothing. The notebook had mentioned something beneath the house. Someone had hidden this. The trapdoor had a thick iron ring. It looked very old. Older than the house itself. Miguel knelt beside it. He hesitated. Then he pulled. The wood groaned. Cold air rushed out. It smelled of wet earth. And something else. Candles. Burned wax. He pointed his flashlight into the darkness. Stone steps disappeared into the ground. There was no end in sight. He should have closed it. He knew that. Instead, he started walking down. 1 step. Then another. The air became colder with every step. The walls were made of rough stone. Water dripped from somewhere far away. His flashlight showed old marks on the walls. Long scratches. Some were deep enough to cut into the stone. As if someone had tried to climb out. After what felt like 5 minutes, the stairs ended. Miguel stood in a narrow hallway. The ceiling was low. The walls were damp. There were no windows. Only darkness. His flashlight reached only a few meters ahead. Beyond that, nothing. He took another step. Crunch. He looked down. Broken toys. A wooden horse. A marble. A tiny shoe. All covered in dust. He froze. The toys looked old. Very old. He bent down and picked up the shoe. Inside it was a faded name written in blue ink. Daniel. The same name from his childhood diary. Miguel. The voice came again. This time it was behind him. He spun around. The hallway was empty. His flashlight shook. No one. Only darkness. I'm here. Now the voice came from ahead. A child. No older than 7. Please don't leave again. Miguel felt his chest tighten. I don't know you, he whispered. The hallway became silent. Then, you did. He kept walking. At the end of the hallway stood a large wooden door. Unlike the black door upstairs, this one was painted red. The paint had almost completely peeled away. Miguel remembered the diary. Grandma says I must never unlock the red door. His breathing became slow. The door was already open. Just a little. A thin line of darkness waited inside. He pushed it gently. The room beyond was round. The walls were covered with hundreds of old photographs. Children. Families. Villagers. Every photograph had one thing in common. One face had been scratched away. Different people. Different years. Always one missing face. Miguel stepped closer. One photograph caught his eye. It showed 5 children standing in front of the salt house. The same picture he had found earlier. This one was untouched. No face had been scratched away. Miguel counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He stared at the 5th child. A thin boy with dark hair. He was smiling. Miguel whispered, Daniel. For a moment, the boy in the photograph blinked. Miguel dropped the picture. It landed face down. The room became completely silent. Then, all at once, every photograph on the wall fell to the floor. Hundreds of frames shattered together. The sound echoed through the basement. Miguel covered his ears. When the noise stopped, the walls were empty. Every photograph was gone. Only one thing remained. A small wooden chair. A boy sat on it. He looked about 7 years old. Dark hair. Pale skin. Bare feet. He wore old-fashioned clothes. His head was lowered. Miguel could not see his face. The child spoke softly. You came back. Miguel's legs felt weak. Are you Daniel? The boy nodded. Very slowly. I waited. Miguel took one careful step forward. What happened here? The boy didn't answer. Instead, he asked, do you remember the game? Miguel shook his head. No. The boy looked sad. You promised you wouldn't forget. For the first time since arriving, Miguel felt something stronger than fear. Guilt. A deep, painful guilt. As if he had done something terrible. Something he could not remember. I'm sorry, he whispered. The boy slowly raised his head. Miguel's heart stopped. The child had no eyes. Only smooth skin where his eyes should have been. Yet somehow, he was looking directly at Miguel. And he smiled. Not an evil smile. A lonely one. Then he said, the house doesn't want your life. Miguel stood frozen. It wants your memory. The candles around the room went out. One by one. Darkness swallowed everything. The last thing Miguel heard before the room became completely black was another child's voice. Not Daniel's. A second one. Then a third. Then a fourth. Soft whispers surrounded him. We're still here. The police found Miguel's car 3 weeks later. It was still parked outside the salt house. The keys were in the ignition. His phone was on the driver's seat. His wallet was untouched. But Miguel Carvalho was gone. The search lasted 10 days. Officers searched the cliffs, the forest, the sea, even the old house. They found nothing. No footprints. No signs of a struggle. No body. Eventually, the case was closed. Another disappearance with no answers. The salt house stood empty once again. The villagers stayed away, just as they always had. No one spoke about Miguel. Not because they had forgotten him, because they were afraid to remember. One cold autumn morning, a young lawyer arrived from Lisbon. His name was André Souza. He carried a folder under one arm. Inside was Miguel's will. Miguel had written it years before. He had no wife, no children. The salt house was now his only property. The papers said it had to be given to its closest living relative, Miguel's cousin, Leonor Carvalho. The lawyer knocked on Leonor's apartment door. She smiled politely as she welcomed him inside. He explained everything. Miguel had disappeared. The house now belonged to her. Leonor looked surprised. I haven't spoken to Miguel in years. I understand. I don't even remember visiting that house. The lawyer nodded. According to these records. He looked down at the file. You visited it once when you were 6. Leonor frowned. I don't remember that. A week later, she drove to the village. The road was quiet. The sea crashed against the cliffs. The salt house waited at the end of the path, exactly as it always had. She stepped out of her car. The front gate was already open. She didn't remember opening it. Inside, the house looked clean, as if someone still lived there. A fire burned quietly in the fireplace. The air smelled of salt. A grandfather clock stood against the wall. Its hands pointed to 3:17. Tick, tick, tick. It was working again. Leonor smiled nervously. Hello. No answer. She placed her suitcase beside the stairs. On the table sat an old notebook. The first page was already open. Written in neat handwriting were 4 words. Welcome home, Leonor. She frowned. Someone had written her name. She looked around the room. No one. A soft laugh echoed upstairs. A child's laugh. She looked toward the ceiling. The sound stopped. Outside. The front door slowly closed by itself. The lock clicked. Leonor didn't hear it. She was too busy reading the next line in the notebook. This time, don't forget. Far beneath the house, in the darkness below the stone floor, a small boy sat alone on a wooden chair. He was no longer smiling. Footsteps echoed down the basement stairs. Someone was coming. The boy looked toward the darkness. A man stepped into the room. It was Miguel. Or at least, it looked like Miguel. His face was pale. His eyes were empty. He walked without making a sound. The boy whispered, "Do you remember now?" Miguel slowly nodded. "Yes. Will you leave?" Miguel looked toward the ceiling, toward the house above them. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I can't." "Why?" Miguel smiled. A sad, tired smile. "Because the house remembers me." The candles went out, one after another. The room disappeared into darkness. Above them, the grandfather clock struck once, then twice, then 3 times. It stopped at 3:17, and somewhere inside the walls, a child quietly whispered, "Who's next?" The end.